Well, the Switch 2 game keycard situation just got a bit more complicated, a bit of a twist thrown in there, and one that I wasn't necessarily expecting to come up because whenever we talk about game keycards and why a publisher is deciding to opt for that as opposed to putting everything on a 64 gigabyte cartridge comes down to the cost of that cartridge and if it makes sense to the bottom line. $15 cartridge, 30% cut to Nintendo. It's like, what are we doing here in the first place? Why are we doing it then? Because it's business, making money, doesn't necessarily add up then, right? Well, no, now we're talking about some technical limitations around this expensive cartridge that you ship your game on. And you know what? When I saw this, I said, ooh, okay, but that actually would complicate things and could be more of a problem than even the cost of the cartridge, which could go down over time. I do wonder if this is something that could be solved by Nintendo outright when it comes to the Switch 2 game cartridges, but we'll go over that here today. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new. Let's head over here. This is posted over on Nintendo Life, saying Ubisoft employee explains why Star Wars Outlaws is a game key card. Now, the thing with Star Wars Outlaws is a very impressive conversion of that game, port of the game, on a handheld device that, when you in portable play, runs at 10 watts. I mean, the fact that it runs the way it does in that environment, it's impressive stuff. Ray tracing, the whole thing, it's all present, right? Well, there is kind of an issue with the game when it comes to the idea of streaming in assets and relying on an SSD that is very, very fast on, say, a PlayStation 5, an Xbox Series, or on PC, and then moving over to the Switch 2 and the cartridge. Okay, so this we can see was over on Blue Sky from Rob Banton. It's the audio architect for Ubisoft's proprietary Snowdrop engine, which it is important to note, this is not someone, say, from the publishing side or the money side who's like, oh, we got to make this all work in terms of the books, and that's why we're going with game keycard. No, they're giving an explanation as to why it just wouldn't work from the Snowdrop engine side. Again, audio architect, not accountant or like publishing, right? So they say Snowdrop relies heavily on disk streaming for its open world environments, and we found the Switch 2 cards simply didn't give the performance we needed at the quality target we were going for. I don't recall the cost of the cards ever entering the discussion, probably because it was moot. I think if we designed a game for the Switch 2 from the ground up, it might have been different. As it was, we'd built a game around SSDs of the initial target platforms, and then the Switch 2 came along a while later. In this case, I think our leadership made the right call. So here's the situation right now, okay? So the Switch 2 game cards, the 64 gigabyte cartridges that you hear come up in the conversation is they're very, very expensive, and companies are passing on it because it doesn't make sense to their bottom line. They are the slowest way to play your game, all right? And we've seen this in benchmarks already. There's one, for example, of Mario Kart that takes much, much longer to load in if you're playing it off of the physical cartridge. So we're talking about a difference of, if you go from the internal storage, it was like 16 seconds, but then on the game card, it was 24 seconds, like a difference of 8 seconds. That might not sound like a lot for load times, but when it's load times with solid state storage, it is. That's actually quite a bit of time. And then you start to think about, okay, well, what kind of speeds are we dealing with there when it comes to reading and loading the game in, say, to memory? Well, with game cards, people have been kind of running numbers, trying to figure this out. Some have looked into patents, or they've looked into some of the leaked information that's come out from different studios. And we've come to the determination that the Switch 2 game cartridge, right around 400 megabytes per second. All right. That is half, even a little less than half, of what a microSD Express card is capable of. Some of the higher end one, but generally that's around like 800 or so, 900 even, megabytes per second. The Switch 2 internal storage is right around 2 gigabytes per second. So you kind of see the issue there when the game card itself, the 64 gigabyte card that keeps coming up again around costs, is a fifth in terms of the speed, or the bandwidth, or the ability to transfer data back and forth, than, say, the Switch 2 internal storage. Now, even there, if you go up to the Xbox Series as 2.4 gigabytes per second, and the PS5 is incredibly fast with its SSD at 5.5 gigabytes per second. So now picture if you are Ubisoft, and you're like, hey, we're going to move Star Wars Outlaws over to the Switch 2 because it is capable, we can do it, we can make it happen. But The lowest common denominator they were dealing with there was the Xbox Series at 2.4. That's close enough to the Switch 2 internal storage 2.1. We can make that work. The game card, though, 400 megabytes per second, that would be very difficult to transfer a lot of these assets in and stream them while the game is running. And that has been a big push right now for this new generation with the PS5 and the Xbox Series. The idea of being able to utilize the SSD in this way is supposed to be the big aha moment for the current generation of systems, going from the spinning disk hard drive, say on the Xbox One or the PS4, up to these very fast, very responsive SSDs. Star Wars Outlaws in particular is an interesting case because it is one of those games on, say, the PlayStation 5, where even if you buy it physically, you need to have an internet connection the first time you start it up to download an update so the game will function. So in a way, it is also a game key disc on the PlayStation 5. We've seen those already, although in this case, there is data on the disc, but then it has to download a couple of gigabytes for it to activate or authenticate something with that lets it work. But when we're talking about the idea of mechanical hard drives to the SSD, there is a video online where a person did try to run Star Wars Outlaws on a mechanical drive, and it was not great, to say the least. Whether it's the benchmarks that showed their character, Kves, falling through a level at one point, or the insane load times of like 6 or 7 minutes versus 11 or 12 seconds for an SSD. So the game itself will even give you a warning if it doesn't detect an SSD and instead thinks you're running off of a hard drive. So yes, Star Wars Outlaws, it is a technically demanding game, as they were aiming for things like ray tracing and solid state drives when they were creating it. I think it is important to note that the developer here did mention that if they had started specifically developing with the Switch 2 in mind when they were starting development on Star Wars Outlaws, it might have been different. They probably could have figured things out. And that's one of the reasons when I look at Nintendo with their first party offerings, well, all of those games, while they're going to be on cartridges, at least at the time of this recording, that's what we've seen and what they've said. It, to me, seems like something that they can figure out as they go along, because guess what? The first party games are going to be developed with the Switch 2 in mind from day one. All right. So that's one of the reasons this is definitely more of a third party thing all the way around. Game key cards and targeting specific platforms. I do wonder, I don't know, is it possible that the game cartridge itself could see like a bit of an upgrade, say, throughout the generation to get closer to the internal storage, or even the micro SD express cards, which really that would probably always be like the minimum baseline, considering, yes, you can load Star Wars Outlaws on a micro SD express card, but some have said with different games, they just perform better off of the internal storage for the Switch 2. So here's my what I think could be a solution. All right. And let me know what you think about this, because this is kind of where we are now with the whole thing, to where it's not even necessarily coming down to the cost of these cartridges anymore. It's like the technical capabilities are now being brought up. So for third parties, which is going to be the thing now, really, you're going to see more and more game key cards, maybe, if this is the case and they just cannot make it work correctly on the game cartridge. Maybe you get to a point where you install the game off of a cartridge that you buy. So everything is on that cart. You don't have to access the internet. It's all technically preserved. Very similar to if you buy a PS5 or an Xbox Series game and you have to spend time installing off of the Blu-ray. That might be the case. It's like, hey, you buy a cartridge, you pop it in. Yes, it needs to take up space on your on the internal storage, but to me, that would be better than the idea of having to download everything and you just get a little authentication key. At least everything is present offline. So if you buy it, yeah, maybe there's a wait of 10 or 15 minutes for everything to move over, but then you'll be good to go. And the funny thing is, we would never know about this if it wasn't for this one developer working on Snowdrop, just kind of throw it out there on social media. Otherwise, we would still be assuming that this has to do with cost of cartridge. And while I can't really think of any other examples that would come up like this, because Star Wars Outlaws is still like the most, I guess, in terms of the technical side, probably the most intensive when it comes to a port and feature rich right now, as we're talking about ray tracing on the Switch 2 with this thing. It does make me wonder if in the future, other third parties will have to opt for a game key card. Otherwise, because then it wouldn't work on the game card. So wow, this is a bit surprising to see this already come up, a major limitation for Nintendo with this system. And is it something they can work out in the future? Well, unless these game cartridges see some kind of upgrade in terms of speed, it might come down to, yes, you have to install your game off of the cartridge. So let me know what you guys think about that idea down below, as I know there are going to be many people who are like, no, I just want it to run off the cartridge. And yes, that would be a great world to be in, where the game cards can keep up and everything. But if they legitimately can't, and it's game key card where you download everything to your internal storage, or game cartridge where everything is on the cart but you have to spend some time installing it, that's kind of the route I'd rather go, especially if that would mean that more and more games come out preserved on a cartridge that you buy and you have everything right there. But let me know what you guys think about this and down below. Were you surprised to hear that in this case, it didn't have anything to do with cost around the cartridge for a game key? It had to do with some of the technical limitations of that cartridge. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.